Hello everyone and welcome back to a year in the TikTok of FatdoctorUK. So we just left off with the fatty liver TikTok and we're going to move on to how much of what we are led to believe is true. Now up to this point I have been covering everything that is related to fat acceptance. I've been covering every TikTok that, because the vast majority of her TikToks seem to lead to that and are connected with some sort of argument towards that. However, Fat Doctor UK seems to be also becoming redundant in some of their TikToks where they just will just repeat the point as though that's self-evident. And in those cases, I'll probably skip them because it gets hard to argue a point from a different perspective, or not different perspective, but different angle every time it's mentioned, and they cover the same, for instance, how weight impacts joints and how they always tie it back to osteoporosis. Another one like that comes up and I'm skipping it because I'm so tired of that same fucking argument. I've pointed out how it's a little bit of a straw man because the general argument is that joint pain doesn't have to be related to disease and weight can impact joint pain. But then they create this very specific weight causes osteoporosis, which they can easily argue. I'm so tired of basically re-explaining that argument over and over again. So unless they come up with a new angle, I'm not covering any more of their joint pain osteoporosis arguments because I've covered it several times now, and it's ones like that where I'm just getting frustrated because I don't know how many times I can point out the same issues with their argument. I feel like there's some that I feel like I've covered quite a bit. The type 2 diabetes I might go a bit more into. I don't remember for sure if we really went into type 2 diabetes stuff before, but it's stuff like that where if I feel like I've argued the same point over and over and over again, because I think we're going into part 6 now. If it's the same topic that we've reviewed that they are covering the same way over and over again, I'm skipping it because it's frustrating. I feel like I'm going insane. So I'm just gonna skip it. Doesn't mean I'm gonna skip all of them, and I'll see what this one starts out with and we'll just start. So let's jump into it. Okay, so I've been trying for the past 10 minutes to get this thing to play. And it has the little play button. I press the play button. It's not playing. I don't know why. I've tried a couple of different things to fix this. I've refreshed the page. I've logged into a different browser to try to see if that worked. I rebooted my computer. I can't get this video to play. I don't know what's going on with this one. And it's the same thing with this one. Press play. I can't get it to play. I don't know if this is a TikTok issue or if they did something marking these videos or whatever. I don't know. But I can't get them to play. So we're going to just move on to the next one. So this comment reads, "Comments like this is why I haven't been to a doctor in 5 years, even though I have concerns about my health."
Can we just talk about this for a minute? This is not a unique experience. In fact, I would argue that this is the lived experience of so many people in marginalised bodies, especially fat marginalised bodies. We have health concerns, but we would rather stay at home than go and see a doctor to address those health concerns. Why would anyone do that? Seriously, why would anyone actively choose to put their own health at risk?
Because they know they're doing something that they're not supposed to and they don't want to have to take responsibility for it. I'm sorry, I'm coming at this from a different angle because I've had so many family members. All the men in my family die very young. None of them reach retirement age. And a good portion for the reason of this is that the men in my family I can't say for the current generation, my generation. I can only account for my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation because I've heard all the stories. I've interacted with them when they were alive. And the men in my family, the vast majority of them, are either smoking, even though their doctor has said that it's going to put them in an early grave and it's going to exacerbate lung issues that they have. They haven't been taking care of chronic conditions like diabetes. I had some family members that died of drug abuse and would refuse to go to the doctor because they didn't want to be told to stop. Part of the reason, like this, it's like, oh, it's because of fat phobia that I don't want to go. No, it's because you don't want to be confronted with the consequences of your actions and your doctor pointing out that part of the reason why you could be experiencing the things that you are experiencing is in fact because of your weight. Yes, if you have like plantar fasciitis, that can be caused definitely by overuse, but also excessive weight can exacerbate it because it's putting more pressure on those tendons. All of your weight sits on your feet. So being overweight can definitely aggravate foot issues. That's not the doctor being biased. That's you have been overeating, you have excessive weight, and that can lend to other issues. Just because you are metabolically healthy, which I think is like the big thing that it's like, I don't have bad cholesterol, I don't have high blood pressure, I don't have diabetes, therefore I'm good. No, that's a few markers of health, not the epitome of health. So I'm sorry, this one touched a nerve for me because it's so I've dealt with people that have refused to go to the doctor even when they desperately needed it because they didn't want to basically confront the common theme that I heard from them is, I'm afraid of what the doctor's going to say. And for a while, I thought that they were afraid that they were going to be diagnosed with something serious, in which case I'm like, well, at least you can get fucking treatment and stand a better chance of rectifying the issue or whatever it is. But later, I found that each of these people that were afraid of what the doctor was going to say were doing some shit that highly impacted their health. That they just refused to, excessive drinking, smoking with like COPD and that sort of thing, not taking care of their chronic conditions like diabetes, and essentially ignoring issues that they didn't want to deal with because it was connected to something that they were doing and they didn't want to stop. So this whole thing of, I'm afraid to go to the doctor because I'm afraid of fat phobia. No, you're afraid of the doctor bringing up you doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, like overeating. You're afraid of the doctor once again holding you accountable for decisions that you make.
Unless going to the doctor was a more frightening experience than staying at home and taking a risk with your own health. Unless the stigma of going to the doctor outweighs the risk of death. That's why this doctor is fighting medical weight stigma, because this is all our fault.
I think that's complete bullshit, but I've already outlined my issue with this whole concept, so I'm going to move on. And for some reason, this is another one that doesn't want to play. I can't get this to play. So I guess we're going to move on. This is frustrating, though.
The laws of healthism, as defined by Dr. Asher Lamy. Number 1, health is something that is easily defined. Number 2, health is something that we can easily control. Number 3, we are responsible for improving our own health. Number 4, a person's worth is determined by their health. Number 5, and this is a favourite of some people, we owe society a debt of health. People in poor health are a drain on society. The unhealthy few end up paying for the lazy, unhealthy masses. Number 6, good health should be our number 1 priority. Number 7, you cannot be fat and healthy. Number 8, fatness is a sign of weakness and lack of self-respect. Number 9, fatness can be cured by eating less and moving more. Number 10, everyone can lose weight if they try hard enough. Number 11, BMI is a perfectly good measure of health, and any health professional that disagrees is not fit for purpose. And when all else fails, there's always number 12. It's okay to discriminate against fat people. So if you want to find out more about the laws of healthism, then why not check out my podcast? Search for the Fat Doctor podcast or Dr. Asha Lamy.
Wait.
The laws of healthism as defined by Dr. Asha Lamy.
Wait. Are they saying healthism as defined by me, but then saying it in third person? I gotta look this up real quick. Okay, I'm not usually one for sharing someone's full name as part of this series, but unfortunately I feel like they left me no choice. Dr. Asher Larmy. So this whole thing is something that they made up, and they are presenting as if it's a third-party source. Oh my god! Like they're presenting this. I didn't know their full name, but then I heard Asher the second time through, and I'm like, wait, isn't that their name? And it is. And their full name is Asher Larmy. So their presentation of this, oh my god, I gotta listen to that first part again.
The laws of healthism as defined by Dr. Asher Lamy. Number 1.
As defined by Dr. Asher Larmy. So not as defined by myself, but as defined by Dr. Asher Larmy. And they don't, like, I understand that they're plugging their podcast in at the end, but the way that it's presented... Oh, I love this. You said in a previous video, health is not easy to define as it has 50 definitions. The way this was presented with the use of a full name as though it is a different person. I don't know. There's something about the presentation of this that felt underhanded. Am I wrong? I can't find it on their website, which is very annoying. So, oh my god, what's training? I'm afraid. What is training? Do I even want to know? Well, we're done. We're done with that for now. That was funny. Don't at me for using Norton, but that was funny. Well, so I could go through these, but quite frankly, I am so caught up on the presentation of this that it would be nice if I didn't have to play through this thing multiple times in order to see each one, because their head is in the way, which is annoying. We've clearly seen enough of their videos that we kind of have an idea of how they feel, and I've already talked about some of the things, but I thought this was really interesting at how this was presented. So we're gonna move on now.
I hear it.
I've got bad knees. I've lost 3 stone. Knees are better. Perfectly reasonable, yes. Because not all joint pain leads to osteoporosis, and sometimes just losing weight helps your joints. I'm going to listen to what they have to say, but if they go into osteoporosis again, we'll finish watching the TikTok since it's only a minute, but I probably won't respond much to it.
It's a lot. And I think it's human nature to base our own understanding of health and illness on our lived experience. This person had quote-unquote bad knees. I don't know what that means. There could be all sorts of underlying diagnoses that could cause bad knees. But they say they lost 3 stone and now they're...
So, saying, I don't know, it feels a little... I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt in that they started looking at this a little too clinically as part of an occupational hazard. Typically, though, like the colloquial version of I have bad knees is that my knees often hurt, or my knees feel weak, or my knees, like, I just have general issues with my knees. They could lock up from time to time, or pain being the most common, I think.
Knees are better. Sure, I'm sure that happened. But that doesn't mean anything to me. I mean, I'm happy for you because your knees aren't hurting you anymore, but it doesn't mean anything to me. Because your personal lived experience is important, but it doesn't actually prove anything. There is no scientific evidence that proves that weight loss helps your knees. Not in the long term, anyway. Here's what we do know. Pain is biological, psychological, and social. Dieting damages you biologically, psychologically, and socially. That's it.
And yet there's no. I'm not gonna touch on the knee pain so much. Thankfully, this is a little bit different, and we're not going down osteoporosis again. But that thing about, one, it doesn't mean much to them because, you know, it's an individual experience, therefore it's like an anomaly sort of thing, which is not helpful. And I want you guys to pay very close attention to their language. Because if it's one thing I've noticed about Fat Dr. UK is what they say is often factually correct, but ignores the spirit of the conversation. In that, they say there is no scientific evidence of weight loss helping your knees. And chances are this is true. I don't have the ability to scour every database and see if I can find something specifically on knees. Because most likely, the studies would look at weight loss helping lower joint pain, so hips, knees, and ankles. There's unlikely to be a specific study looking specifically at knee pain. Doesn't mean that it couldn't exist out there, but it's unlikely because generally the studies are going to look a little at something a little less specific and look at joint pain. It could be looking at all joints, it could just be looking at lower body joints, but it's unlikely to look specifically at the knees. So what they're saying is technically correct, but ignores the spirit of the conversation, because the general point that this person is trying to make is that Fat Dr. UK says there's no connection, really, no scientific connection between weight loss and helping joint pain, specifically osteoporosis. This person says, generally, I have bad knees, which just could mean knee pain. I lost 3 stone, knees are better. So they changed their argument, saying that there's no scientific evidence saying that weight loss helps knees, because most of the studies would probably look at lower joints. Putting that out there. I fucking hate specific language like this where they're not technically wrong. Like, in all likelihood, they're not technically wrong, but it's so specific as to be nitpicky.
So I'm going to spin this comment around a little bit.
So the comment says, isn't a lack of activity unhealthy, though? Take 2 groups of fat people. Wouldn't the group that exercises have better health outcomes?
Because I sort of agree with it and mostly don't. Being active is, for want of a better word, good for you. And that's a very generalised statement, and we'd have to define what good for you means before we can go on. But this is a TikTok video and I only have a few more seconds left, so I won't. But, you know, it's individual, right? We cannot assume that exercise is good for everyone. There may be very good reasons. For example, they may have a disability that results in very low energy, in which case physical activity can worsen their symptoms. All in all, on average, physical activity does improve health outcomes.
So I want to touch real quick on that disability where they have lower energy and therefore exercise would not be good for them. I think that's taking a very distinct perspective, and it's a very generalized look. I don't know, for instance, like with chronic fatigue syndrome or other things, how that would necessarily be impactful. For even those in which fatigue is an issue, I would think that some level of exercise, and I'm not talking like full hardcore like workouts. I'm just talking like they make an effort to go on a decent walk 3 or 4 times a week. I think that would benefit at the very least 99% of people. And actually, I guess if you want to get into it, there's people that can't physically exercise, like those that are quadriplegic. Like, I could be wrong there. So there is, like, that. But this is getting into so specific as to make sure that they can preserve their point. When, for the vast majority of people, some form of even low to moderate exercise 5 days a week would be beneficial. Like, if you want to hone in on the very few exceptions, then your point isn't very strong.
But that does not mean that lack of physical activity is quote-unquote unhealthy. Increased health outcomes on a population level cannot be translated into an individual assessment. Do I agree with?
And see, again, they're like, well, yes, if you have these very specific issues, then it wouldn't necessarily benefit you. Therefore, we can't say it works on a individual. And it's just like, okay, but most people fall into the average. The vast majority of people fall into the average. That's why they're the average. So the vast majority of people would benefit from some level of regular activity. And the lack of exercise for the vast majority of people would lead to lower tolerance for physical exertion, more difficulty breathing during physical exertion, lower muscle mass, and the points go on. So it just feels so disingenuous.
The second part of the statement, but not the first part.
As a doctor, you should know that being fat isn't healthy. Sure, bud, whatever you need to tell yourself to sleep at night. So, here's the thing. This is another way that people who don't necessarily have something to combat the statement right away, this is kind of something that they do, that sigh and that derisive look and the condescension, yeah, sure, bud, that sort of thing. And the placing it as some sort of internal issue with the person arguing, as, you know, whatever you need to say to so you can sleep at night. It's because they don't have a true decent argument, or at the very least aren't willing to prop up anything for it. And normally, for other fat acceptance people, I really wouldn't put as much burden of proving their points, because with a lot of the FAs, it seems to be either rhetoric based or personal experience based, and it comes from a very defensive position. And I think to a certain extent that's true with FatDoctorUK too. But FatDoctorUK is, one, a doctor, so their field of expertise holds more weight in this arena. And as a result, I do hold them to a higher standard. So my guess is that rather than just leaving this alone or creating a more comprehensive video of studies to support their perspective that apparently being fat can be healthy, that's what I know. They didn't say that, but that's like the general, with the dismissive look and stuff, it's basically the communication that we're getting from the body language and that little blurb thing that they put at the bottom is that this person is completely wrong. That's the general tone that they're giving based on their behaviors. I understand that they're a doctor and that this is social media, and perhaps I shouldn't hold them to such a high standard, but they entered this of their own free will. They have chosen to leave these TikToks up. So I'm going to continue to be a bit of a petty bitch.
So diabetes is caused by being fat, right? Wrong. We don't actually know what causes diabetes. But we do know that there's a very strong genetic component, and that people with a family history of type 2 diabetes tend to have much higher levels of insulin in their blood compared to those without a family history. Now, why is this important? Well, high levels of insulin in the blood are a sign of insulin resistance. Unlike type 1 diabetics, those with type 2 are able to make insulin, but the body has become resistant to it. Now, the reason this is relevant is because insulin resistance causes weight gain. So being fat doesn't actually cause diabetes. It's actually the other way around. Diabetes, or insulin resistance, causes you to gain weight. I'll be sharing.
So one citation needed for that last one, and we're going to take a look into the evidence that they've presented. But, and this is anecdotal, and I recognize that this is anecdotal, but I have quite a few relatives with diabetes, and they're not fat. They are actually a tad bit underweight. So saying that type 2 diabetes causes, the insulin resistance and stuff causes weight gain without, and I find it interesting that when it comes to something like exercise, they're willing to put all these caveats of there are people for whom this isn't a good thing, or that's good on a population-based model, but doesn't account for the individual experience. But when it comes to type 2 diabetes, they're completely willing to put this umbrella view that insulin resistance causes weight gain, even though there's plenty of thin type 2 diabetics out there. Very interesting.
Loads more in my interactive webinar this Wednesday. You can book it through my website, FatdoctorUK.
All sorts of promotional plugs. Okay, let's see. There we go. Diabetes in Identical Twins. Published in 1981. You know what? We'll take a look at it, though. Diabetes in Identical Twins. Can we see anything else, or do they block it? So I'll take a look at that one, too, but I really wanted to see this Identical Twin study. I think I found it. So, let's take a quick look at this. I think this is, right here is the abstract. The object of this work is to try to elucidate the role of genetic and environmental factors in the etiology of diabetes by studying a series of identical twins. Concordance is identical monozygotic twins does not necessarily mean that a disease is genetic in origin. Twins usually live together in early life and thus share the same environment. Concordance could therefore be a result of genetic and environmental similarity. So right fucking here, it's already showing that just because, I mean, it puts the caveat in the first fucking paragraph of just because it's taking a look at concordance, not drawing full-on conclusions from it, because they recognize that identical twins are often raised in the same environment, and therefore it's hard to tell whether the similarities in identical twins could be through either the same environmental factors or genetic factors, when it's most likely a combination of the two. Discordance, on the other hand, must indicate that a disease is due, at least in part, to non-genetic factors. We are therefore particularly interested in discordance in younger and concordance in older twins. So, previous studies, present study. We have now enlarged the series to a total of 200 pairs of identical twins in whom one or both is diabetic, as insulin-dependent diabetes and non-insulin-dependent diabetes. We have divided the twins into two categories rather than into young and old, as in our previous papers. So I do want to do a quick look at insulin, because to me, insulin-dependent diabetes just says that you need insulin to regulate it, whereas insulin-dependent diabetes means that you don't, but I want to double check that. Okay, so something worth noting, now that I've looked this up, is the previous term. So apparently we have type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but they weren't always referred to that way. There was type 1 used to be referred to as childhood diabetes, with type 2 being referred to as adult diabetes. That I remember being a kid, and that's what it was referred to. But apparently earlier than that, type 1 diabetes was referred to as insulin-dependent diabetes, where type 2 diabetes was referred to as non-insulin-dependent diabetes. And given that this is a 1981 study, I think it's fair to assume that this is what they mean, given the historical definitions and terms used to describe these forms of diabetes. So, the purpose of the study now, we have now enlarged our series to a total of 200 pairs of identical twins in whom one or both is diabetic, as insulin-dependent diabetes and non-insulin-dependent diabetes are etiologically distinct diseases. Okay, we have divided the twins into two categories rather than into young versus old. Okay. proof of identity, diagnosis and treatment. Insulin-dependent diabetic twins. The observation that IDD twins can be discordant for diabetes, if true, shows that this type of diabetes cannot be entirely due to genetic causes. It might be argued that discordance is a temporary feature and that eventually the IDD twin pairs will all become concordant. Our observation suggests that this is unlikely. The interval between diagnosis in concordant twins tends to be only a few years, while many of the discordant twins have remained discordant for a long time. Of the 80 concordant pairs, the second twin became diabetic within 5 years of the first. In 70% of the pairs. In 14%, the interval was between 5 and 10 years, and in only 8 did it exceed 10 years. Okay. Non-insulin dependent diabetes, this would be type 2. Of 53 identical twin pairs, 48 are concordant for non-insulin, for just say NIDD, and only 5 are discordant. This with IDD pairs, the interval between diagnosis in concordant and IDD co-twins is usually short. In 35 of the 48 pairs, 73%, the second twin became diabetic within 5 years of the first. Of the remaining 13 pairs, 11 became concordant between 6 and 10 years, and of the remaining 2 concordant 11 and 12 years after the diagnosis of the first twin. As few of the co-twins had been tested at the time of diagnosis, the diabetes in the index twin is probable that the real period of discordance is even less than the features suggest. In all the 5 discordant pairs, the affected twin has been diagnosed only within the last 3 years. Alright. Body weight. Obesity is widely assumed to be an implication of the etiology of non-insulin dependent diabetes. Diabetes is commoner in fat people than lean, and NIDDs are on average overweight. Weight reduction is almost universally advocated as treatment for NIDD. If obesity is important to the etiology of NIDD, how can we explain the high concordant rates of identical twins with this type of diabetes? Are they concordant for obesity, and is this the reason for their concordance for diabetes? We have reliable figures for the weight at the time of diagnosis of diabetes in only 21 of the NIDD pairs. In only 21 of the NIDD pairs. In the others, information is lacking or incomplete, usually because one or both of the twins of the pair could not recall his weight at the relevant time, or because one of the twins was not available for questioning. It is striking that these 21 pairs' body weight in the 2 twins was often different. In 16, the co-twins differed from each other by at least 5 kilograms at the time of diagnosis of diabetes in the first, in 8 by 10 kilograms, and in 7 by 15 kilograms. And in 2 pairs, one twin was more than 20 kilograms heavier than his co-twin, yet in all these pairs both had diabetes. Expressing the results in percentage terms, co-twins differ from each other by at least 10% of average body weight in 12 of 18, and at least 20% in 7. In 3 of the 21 pairs, we do not have adequate figures of height. In 3 of the pairs, one twin was obese, and the other was not. In 12 of the pairs, the lighter twin was the first to develop diabetes. Okay, interesting. In 6 of the 18 pairs, both twins exceeded 110% of the average body weight. In 5, one twin exceeded 110%, and the other did not. In 7 pairs, neither twin was overweight. Thus, these twin pairs of concordant for diabetes even when the weight differs considerably and when neither twin is overweight. This unexpected finding suggests that the genetic component, which is so powerful in an IDD, acts independently of obesity. Of the 5 still discordant pairs, the diabetic twin was heavier in 2 and lighter in 3. In contrast, the differences in weight, the height of the co-twins was very similar, in all 18 pairs in which the height of both twins at the time of diagnosis was known is differed by no more than 2.5 centimeters. Diet and parity. Other possible etiological factors in diabetes are diet and parity. I don't know what this word means. The state or condition of being equal, especially in regards to status and pay. Okay. It is difficult to make any satisfactory dietary assessment. We were not able to demonstrate any differences between the concordant and discordant twins in this respect. Information concerning parity was likewise scarce. It was in only 2 discordant IDD pairs had both twins given birth before the onset of diabetes. In 2 other pairs, only the non-diabetic twins had had a baby. We can therefore draw no conclusions concerning a possible role of parity in the etiology of IDDD, nor can we say anything about parity and NIDD, since almost all pairs of NIDD twins are concordant. Conclusion. The fact that about half the IDD pairs are discordant and seem likely to remain so suggests that this type of diabetes does not have an entirely genetic basis. Some further support for an environmental cause comes from the greater number of discordant than concordant pairs aged 20 to 39 who were living apart at the time of diagnosis of diabetes. On the other hand, in later life, when almost all pairs were living apart, concordant pairs outnumbered discordant, as they did in early life when all pairs were living together. It might be thought that some idea of the relative importance of the genetic and environmental factors in the etiology of IDD could be gained by determining the concordance rates of twins. About 55% of our IDD twins are concordant, but this is unlikely to be true concordance rate, as ascertainment is biased in favor of concordant pairs, and furthermore, concordance does not necessarily denote genetic effect. For these reasons, we do not believe that concordance rates for an inherited disease indicate the strength or penetrance of the gene, nor that in this case they support the theory that IDD is due to single or autosomal recessive gene. So I'm more interested in the NIDD. In non-insulin dependent diabetes, the situation is different. There is no association with the HLA system, and there is nearly complete concordance in twin pairs, and the unaffected twins already show metabolic abnormalities. This despite the fact that most twins were living apart when diabetes was diagnosed, and they were frequently different in body weight. It has long been accepted that obesity is important in the pathogenesis of NIDD, but on these results, it is difficult to assess its significance. We conclude that genetic factors are predominant in etiology of non-insulin dependent diabetes. So just because I want to give another look at genetic versus environmental components of type 2 diabetes before we move on, and then I would like to get back to FatdoctorUK. I don't know if we'll go into the second article just because this is eating up quite a bit of time. And I do want to eventually get done with FatdoctorUK because it's getting exhausting going through their stuff. But I do feel the need to give a more recent example. This is a 2015 article. There are more recent articles, but they're more technical. I tried to read one. Actually, a good portion of this video is going to have that cut out because I realized I couldn't make a whole lot of sense out of it because it used a lot of technical terms that I'm unfamiliar with, and I had a hard time parsing through the different medical terms. This one seems a little bit more straightforward for the layman. So, this is a 2015 article, Genetic and Environmental Components of Family History in Type 2 Diabetes. The abstract says, family history of diabetes is a major risk factor for type 2 diabetes, but whether this association derives from shared genetic or environmental factors is unclear. And keep in mind, this is over 30 years later, that they still say that whether it's genetic or environmental factors that contribute to type 2 diabetes is unclear. 30 years later, and this is the current prevailing thought, at least for 2015, but I'm pretty sure it's still the current prevailing thought. To address this question, we developed a statistical framework that models 4 components of variance. including known and known genetic and environmental factors using liability threshold model. Focusing on parental history, we simulated case control studies with 2 first-degree relatives in each individual, assuming 50% genetic similarity and a range of values of environmental similarity. By comparing the association with parental history with type 2 diabetes in our simulations to case control studies of type 2 diabetes nested in the nurse's health study and health professional follow-up study, we estimate that first-degree relatives have a correlation of 23% in their environmental contribution to type 2 diabetes liability, and that this shared environment is responsible for 32% of the association of parental history and type 2 diabetes, with the remainder due to shared genetics. Estimates are robust to varying model parameter values, and our framework can be extended to different definitions of family history. In conclusion, we find that association between parental history and type 2 diabetes derives from predominantly genetic but also environmental factors or environmental effects. So I want a little bit more expanse on that. So we'll just take a quick look at the results and then go down to the discussion. Baseline characteristics of cases and controls represented in Table 1 is logistic regression analysis, adjusting for age, lifestyle factors, BMI, and GRS. The odds ratio of type 2 diabetes associated with positive parent history of diabetes was 2.82 in the NHS and at 2.86 in the HPFS. The discussion is easier for me to parse, so we're going to just read the discussion. In the current study, we quantify the extent to which family history derives from genetic and environmental factors. We developed a statistical framework that models 4 components of variance, including known and unknown genetic and environmental factors, using a liability threshold model. Our approach relies on comparison between simulations and empirical data. By comparing the association of parental history with type 2 diabetes in our simulations to case control studies of type 2 diabetes nested in the NHS and HPFS, we estimate that first-degree relatives have a correlation of 23% in their environmental contribution to type 2 diabetes liability, and that is shared environment is responsible for 32% of the association between parental history and type 2 diabetes, and the remainder due to shared genetics. These findings corroborate and extend the earlier work by Corey et al. From 1988, which relied exclusively on simulations and did not analyze real phenotypes. Although the current study focused on parental history, our framework can also be extended to definitions of family history, including sibling history. Our methods can also be applied to full cohort studies instead of ascertained case control studies. From what I gathered from this, having a first-degree relative with type 2 diabetes results in a correlation of 23% for diabetes, so nearly a quarter, but their environmental contribution of type 2 diabetes liability, and that this shared environment is responsible for 32%, nearly a third of your risk. So even if we take that this is largely a genetic disease, even if we just take this, okay, it's say 67% of your chance of getting diabetes is due to shared genetics. Studies of related individuals have traditionally been used to estimate the environmental and genetic components underlying familial aggregation of disease, but are often underpowered and subject to a number of biases. For example, the assumption of equal shared environments between monozygotic and dizygotic twins is often not valid and could lead to an overestimate of shared genetics. So it could lead to an overestimate of shared genetics. The assumption that the correlation of adoptees and their biological parents is due to genetic factors and the correlation with their adoptive parents is due to environmental factors may be violated when placement is selective. Estimates of heritability also may be upwardly biased when cases are selected from samples with closely related pairs of individuals, or when certain types of epistatic gene-gene interactions exist. Finally, several conceptual issues surrounding these designs also impact the interpretation and generalizability of the findings. Studies of unrelated individuals with available genetic, environmental, and family history data are less susceptible to the aforementioned biases, and their large size, availability, and diversity allow for greater power. To our knowledge, no previous studies have thoroughly exploited these advantages. Chatterjee developed a combined approach of kin cohort and case control studies with application to breast cancer and estimates of residual family aggregation, defined as risk conferred by a positive family history, excluding risk caused by known variants, but do not partition the estimate that environmental and unknown genetic factors, Baddeek created a model to simulate the incidence of breast ovarian cancer in the family of a mutation carrier, but do not incorporate environmental factors. Our approach is based on the liability threshold model, which is widely used, but largely untestable with data we analyze here. We caution that our results could be affected by model misspecification if this is not the correct model. The quality and quantity of data collected from a population will be important determinant of how well our method performs. Although our method is flexible enough to be applied to various case control models, the results remain largely population specific. The high level of education and interest in health in the NHS and HPFS may reduce the variance of environmental exposures predisposing to disease, which may potentially lead to an overestimation of genetic contribution to the analysis. The phenotypic variance for height and BMI explained by additive S&P effects in an extended sample. These two cohorts is 35 and 22% respectively, and is comparable to those estimated for cohorts with supposedly more generalizable characteristics, suggesting selection biases in NHS and HPFS may be limited. Like many epidemiological cohorts, the exposure data for NHS and HPFS were largely collected via self-report, which is prone to error and biases and often limits the amount of detailed data collected. In the current study, we use simple definitions of parental and family history, as these are frequently used in large population settings. More complex family history scores incorporating age of disease onset, gender, and family structures have been proposed and might be considered in future applications of our method. Epigenetics is not specifically accounted for in our framework, but will be only one of the many factors contributing to shared and unshared environmental components. In contrast, the environmental data, genetic data, are measured very well. For type 2 diabetes, however, the variance explained by known variants is but a small fraction of the estimated heritability. As more disease loci are discovered, the performance of our method is likely to improve. So there's a lot of caveats to their results from the sound of it. So there's like the self-report issue, there's the fact that they could just be using the wrong model, there's the fact that there's just different things that aren't accounted for in this model, and it's not to say that therefore we throw all the information out. I think that it's still worth noting that there is a genetic component to type 2 diabetes. However, even with this one, which could very well lead, because it even says in the discussion that we read that it could lead to a misattribution of higher level of genetics than is really there. But even if we took this information as it's given, a third of that is still environmental factors. So to say that this is entirely a genetic issue is disingenuous, especially when you're looking at fucking 40-year-old data. This one even kind of pointed out, fucking where was it? But it pointed out that the use of twins for this type of thing can create an overestimation of genetic factors. So, I mean, it's just really interesting. We're like an hour and 10 minutes in. I think they talk about type 2 diabetes again. What was the other one also out of date study? Wait, where'd the other study go? There it is. From May 1998. I'm not looking at it. I'm done. I'm done with this TikTok. This is so far out of date. The other one was even more out of date, and I kind of wish I'd looked at this one to begin with, but I'm still glad I looked at that first one, because the study that I showed you guys showed that the use of twins in the study of diabetes can cause an overestimation in genetic factors. So, we're moving on.
So everybody knows that the best way to treat diabetes is to lose some weight. I mean, that's what pretty much every health professional out there is telling us.
I think that that's an oversimplification of what people are told. Because again, as I've said, I have a lot of family with type 2 diabetes. Like, it does run fairly strong in my family, more so with the older generations, you know, knock on wood. This is not an entirely correct assessment. Because I have a couple of family members that are thin. So the idea of treating their type 2 diabetes with more weight loss was not something that was proposed. However, those two family members are also very sedentary, and their doctors have told them to, you know, try to work on exercising more. So there is, like, that helps with the regulation. Same with avoiding, you know, high amounts of carbs, high sugar, that sort of thing. So while weight loss is suggested, it's also framed in the way of lifestyle changes. Like, yes, weight loss, but primarily lifestyle changes. And that those lifestyle changes would result in weight loss, because the lifestyle changes suggested are basically less processed food and carbs, lower sugar intake, more exercise, and more like whole foods, meats, veggies, and some fruit. The family members that have type 2 diabetes that I am in regular contact with are fairly older, and they can have some fruits, but there's also some, like, grapes are apparently very high in sugar, and they can't eat more than a couple of those at a time. Veggies, lean meats, that sort of thing is encouraged. So this is not saying that, you know, everyone knows that the cure for, like, the treatment for diabetes is weight loss seems to be a purposely oversimplistic representation of what's actually recommended.
But it's not actually true at all. In fact, studies have shown that weight loss doesn't benefit diabetics in the long run. Worse still, it can actually make your diabetes worse. Now, the reason that this isn't common knowledge...
Let me see the full title. Let me see the full title and the fucking author, because I will look this up. This will be the last TikTok that we look at today, because I cannot... We're running out of time, and if this gets too big, I'm not even going to be able to edit it, because my fucking editing software will crash. But I will look at this for my last one. If I can see this fucking study, if you move your goddamn head.
Is that the vast majority of studies only follow up participants for a maximum of 6 months. But those that...
Okay, well, at least we can see this. A review of weight loss interventions for obese people with non-insulin dependent diabetes, which that's an old term for it, isn't it? I'm gonna look it up. And if it's really old, I don't have the energy to go through a 40-year-old study again. This was fucking published in 1995. Okay, I don't have the energy to go through a fucking 27-year-old study just to prove it wrong. The fact that it's from 1995 is reason enough to say there's probably issues with it. This was from 2019, and it's Educational Weight Loss Interventions in Obese and Overweight Adults with Type 2 Diabetes, a systematic review and meta-analysis of random controlled trials. So this one we are going to just, so this is like the abstract. So the aim, The worldwide prevalence of type 2 diabetes mellitus is increasing, with most individuals with the disease being overweight and obese. Weight loss can reduce disease-related morbidity and mortality, and weight loss weight losses of 10 to 15 kilograms have been shown to reverse type 2 diabetes. The review aimed to determine the effectiveness of community-based educational interventions with weight loss in type 2 diabetes. The systematic review of meta-analysis randomized controlled trials in obese and overweight adults aged 18 to 75 with the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. Primary outcomes were weight and or BMI. These things in BASE, SCOPUS, and the Cochrane Central Register of Controlled Trials were searched from inception to June 2019. Trials were classified into specified a priori comparisons according to intervention type and pooled standardized mean difference from baseline and follow-up and 95% confidence intervals between trial groups. Difference in difference were estimated through random effects meta-analysis using the inverse variance method. Heterogeneity was quantified using I-squared, and publication bias was explored visually using funnel plots. The results were very number-based, and I'm not going to look at that. We'll try. Some 7,383 records were screened, 228 full-text articles were assessed, and 49 random controlled trials were included in this review, with 44 being suitable for inclusion into the meta-analysis. Pooled estimates of education combined with low-calorie, low-carbohydrate meal replacements or low-fat meal replacements appeared most effective. Conclusion: low-calorie, low-carbohydrate meal replacements or diets combined with education appear to be most promising interventions to achieve the largest weight and BMI reductions in people with type 2 diabetes. Weight loss improves outcomes for people with type 2 diabetes. There has been considerable expansion in related intervention research. The comprehensive review of 49 randomized controlled trials suggests multi-component educational interventions in community settings were effective for weight loss in people with type 2 diabetes. Education combined with low-calorie, low-carbohydrate, or low-fat meal replacements or diets appear to achieve the largest reduction in weight and BMI. This study provides review-level evidence on effective models for weight loss in people with type 2 diabetes. When specifying and delivering these interventions, education incorporating low-calorie, low-carbohydrate, or low-fat meal replacement should be considered. So this has been a bit of a ride, but this is going to be like the last study that we look at for the day. So we're going to start with just the first paragraph of the introduction. Type 2 diabetes affects almost 1 in 10 adults in the UK and 422 million adults worldwide. Most people with type 2 diabetes have disease-related morbidity and reduced longevity. The disease is particularly devastating for a growing number of younger people affected who tend to be more obese and lose more life years through diabetes. Current guidelines for management of type 2 diabetes focuses heavily on multi-drug treatments to reduce blood glucose and associated elevated risks of cardiovascular disease, but life expectancy remains substantially reduced. Discussion. Our finding confirms that type 2 diabetes of up to 6 years duration is not necessarily a permanent lifelong condition. Weight loss sufficient to achieve remission can be attained in many individuals by use of evidence-based structured weight management program delivered in a non-specialist community setting by routine primary care staff. Just less than a quarter of participants in the intervention group achieved weight loss of 15 kilograms or more at 12 months. Half maintained more than 10 kilograms loss, and almost half had remission of diabetes off anti-diabetic medication. This result is substantially in excess of the 22% remission rate that is deemed a priori to be clinically important. Oh wow, that is a significant difference. Almost half had received remission in diabetes through weight loss, which is significantly more than the 22% remission rate that's deemed a priori to be clinically important. That's really interesting. So see, weight loss can have a substantial effect. and that informed the power calculation. Remission was closely related to the degree of weight loss maintained at 12 months, with achievement of 86% of participants with at least 15 kilograms weight loss and 73% of those with weight loss of 10 kilograms or more. 28% of all eligible individuals volunteered to participate, and 79% completed the intensive total diet replacement phase, in keeping with evidence showing that people with type 2 diabetes rank reversal of the disease as their top priority for research. The approach used in DIRECT differs from many weight loss management treatments and is structured designed with the focus from the outset on the need of long-term maintenance for weight loss. Individual flexibility is important to optimize individual results. Bariatric surgery has dominated discussion of type 2 diabetes remission as the most effective way for producing major weight loss. However, this option comes at a high financial cost and with the risk of long-term problems, such as postprandial hypoglycemia and micronutrient deficiencies that restrict acceptability. The large number of people with type 2 diabetes makes it impossible to offer surgery to all people, even if this approach were financially possible and palatable to everyone. Let's see. Weight loss leads to rapid and marked fall in blood pressure. This risk of postural hypotension if antihypertensive drugs are continued. The acute fall in blood pressure with low energy formula diet is greater than anticipated from reduced salt intake alone. So weight loss also definitely shows a marked fall in blood pressure as well. Quality of life improved significantly in the intervention group at 12 months, but was unchanged in the control group. The need to take anti-diabetic medication was greatly decreased. The benefits to individuals and improved physical and psychological well-being accompanying substantial weight loss has previously been documented. And I'm sorry, I'm tired of going through a bunch of different research articles at this point, so I am just kind of going over the highlights of this. But I think we got our answer. This is a 2018 study versus her 1995 versus their 1995 study that showed significant benefits of weight loss. We'll finish listening to them for this one, and then I think we're done for the day.
Go beyond 6 months, especially those that go beyond 2 years, show a very different picture. Whilst intentional weight loss leads to short-term improvements in blood sugar control, most type 2 diabetics will relapse within 18 months. You can find out more information about diabetes in my next...
Notice though that their relapse was most likely happened because they stopped adhering to their diet, most likely. And now they're plugging their podcast again, which I don't give a fuck about.
So everybody knows that the best way to treat diabetes...
Okay, so I went and looked. We actually have one more video in this row, which we will look at. I've looked at enough type 2 diabetes stuff. It's another type 2 diabetes video. This video is getting too long, so we're just going to do a quick watch of it. I'll do a quick last minute response, and then we're ending the video.
So if diabetes causes weight gain as opposed to the other way around, and intentional weight loss doesn't really benefit type 2 diabetics in the long term, why is it that people associate fatness with diabetes?
Because actual recent evidence, peer-reviewed evidence, supports it. Because you are the one that is showing 40, 30, 25-year-old data and presenting it as current representation of how the medical community looks at diabetes, which is simply factually not true. We looked at the different articles. We looked at your articles.
And why is it that pretty much every health professional out there is trying to get you to lose weight? Well, first of all, it's important to remember that
because the reason why they're trying to get you to lose weight is because current evidence supports it.
Evidence is nothing new. Check out this article from the New England Journal of Medicine in 1986. The author writes that it's tradition rather than scientific evidence that causes professional...
Except scientific evidence has been recently produced over the years. And I find it interesting that you are acting like from 1986 it happened so long ago and it was through tradition, and therefore, yet the information that you cited was from 1981.
To prescribe weight loss as a treatment for diabetes. But it's not just tradition, folks. It's good old-fashioned capitalist greed. It's the result of years and years of propaganda created by Big Pharma. If you want to find out more, join me in my webinar.
Alright, no, we will not join you in your webinar. I'm not doing this shit. I'm not doing this anymore. I will finish Fat Doctor UK. We have now finished those 2 rows, and we still have all of this to still go. I need a break. I need a break from Fat Doctor UK. We're gonna take a 2-week break. We'll do Gigi Peach again, and then we'll do someone else. For fuck's sake, where did I leave off? There we are. We're gonna take a 2-week break because I find Fat Doctor UK very exhausting. Because they provide so much evidence that is so fucking old that, I mean, you can Google search any of their articles that they've presented and you can get the full article through Google. You do not need any sort of school credentials or research credentials in order to like get into EBSCOhost and stuff for the premium articles. Most likely the reason why you can find those so easily is because they're so fucking old. And I think this kind of goes to show maybe even some of the FAs that aren't medical professionals thinking that they've done their research and, well, look at all of this, look at these studies. Well, yes, those studies are so old. Oftentimes the reason something is free is because it's no longer relevant. That's not always the case. I want to be clear, that's not always the case. But a lot of the times the free stuff that you can see is free because it's no longer important enough to be guarded by the community that created it. So you gotta take it with a grain of salt. And I'm gonna just kind of end it here because I'm tired. I'm tired. You probably saw at the beginning of this video, and I'm planning on putting it at the end here. I now have pet tax pics for you guys, especially since we didn't hear from my dog today. I'm not sure who I'm putting up first. Probably my dog. You might have to suffer through a few weeks of different pictures of my dog because I love her. But we're also going to feature my sister's cat and 3 of my grandmother's 4 cats because one of the cats just does not socialize. But for today, we're probably looking at my dog. This is Lily. She's a Chihuahua Dachshund mix, and I love her. Things that are going on so far this week for me. One, for those of you that liked Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel now has a release date, a general release date, summer of 2023, and I'm so fucking excited. Other news, I finished my first 5K yesterday, Saturday, October 29th. I finished it. It was super fun. It was a zombie run. So there were people dressed as zombies that slapped stickers on people for those that were infected by the zombies in the run. I'm a slow runner, so I was like one of the first that was infected, but it was super fun. Oddly enough, too, I found that I think that either I got really used to my running trail, that my perception of how long something is became skewed, or the GPS on my phone as it was like tracking me is off, because the 5K that I ran felt so much longer than my usual like practice 5K runs. So I actually ended up walking the majority of it, which I knew would happen because I haven't been able to like fully run a 5K, and I was okay with that because it's just a matter of getting used to it. I also found that I wasn't a huge fan of waking up early on a Saturday morning. But it's something I would definitely do again. I'm thinking that it's probably not going to be more than once a season sort of thing for me. I'll continue to run on my own and stuff. But like going to an event like that, I tend to tire out pretty easily socially. And so kind of keeping that to once a season I think would be good for me. But it was a lot of fun. I would do it again. We got a free mini scoop of edible cookie dough at the end, which was nice. And I got a t-shirt and a finisher medal, which was fun. So really fun. Really fun. I really enjoyed it. I am getting very frustrated with one of my classes that I'm doing for my library credential for teaching, because one of the teachers that I have made her class 3 years ago. I have pointed out a couple of times how, like, your link no longer works. I know. I knew that when I put it in 3 years ago. But, hopefully people will be smart like you and just look it up on their own. And I'm like, what kind of teacher fucking does that? If you knew it was a broken link, why did you put it in the assignment? I've worked with enough people that a lot of the people that I've seen in these types of programs tend to get anxious and a little overly focused on what the teacher offers. So not everyone will necessarily do that, and I feel like it's kind of wrong to penalize them when you presented wrong materials. And then there was another one where she used the word synthesize an article when she meant summary, and I had to end up completely rewriting my paper, which is very frustrating because I didn't fully understand what synthesize meant. I figured it was synthesized with your personal experiences, which is what I did, and that was wrong. She corrected me, and I had to rewrite the whole thing, which pissed me off. And it's like, your instructions say synthesize. This was my best understanding of how to synthesize the article. Yes, well, I meant summary. Well, how the fuck was I supposed to know that? So I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed. But, looking forward to the month of November. I have 2 craft fairs that I'm going to. One for the school district I work for, so I get to not only take a look for potential Christmas presents and stuff, but I get to support people in the district that I work, which is fun. And then also a regular one that a private school puts out. Like, it's a private religious school, but they welcome everyone in the community, regardless of whether you're part of their religion or not. It is the most expansive craft fair that I've ever been to, and I love going to it. So it's been canceled for the past 2 years. So I'm super excited, and I'm hoping I can find this spice lady that put together some of my favorite spice blends for, like, cooking chicken in, because it was fucking delicious. So I'm really excited about that too. I think I'm gonna leave it here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.